Welcome everyone to the second Generation Ziegler workshop on how to connect with youth to positively impact them. We're really excited that you're here this evening. How are you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing great. It's been another productive day. As I said last time, I don't golf, so I go to the farm. So I spent the day at the farm today, playing a little catch up. So it was a good day. So how about you?
Oh, we had a good day here in Raleigh, North Carolina. A beautiful day, a little bit chillier than normal for this time of the year, but it's still a lot of fun, and we're looking forward to the holidays. Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
It was sensational. I didn't gain any weight. I figured that's a win.
That is a win. That is a win. Well, as we got lots of people who are coming on, we do appreciate this. We had a great turnout for the workshop last week, and it looks like we're having another great turnout tonight. If you'll just tell us, type in where you're from. You have a chat function. You can certainly jump in at any time and let us know what is going on. We got some folks here from Texas, looks like New Mexico, some more folks from North Carolina, folks from all over the place. It looks like this evening as they come in Nebraska. We got someone jumping in from Nebraska. Like Nebraska. I've always liked Nebraska. Did some speaking when I was in college in Nebraska. So
had
an excellent time there.
Wrong, and Nebraska is too cold for me.
Well, my daughter's best friend goes to Nebraska. So there you go. So we'll get started on tonight's workshop. As I mentioned, I'm James McLean. That's our business partner, Matt Rush, from the great state of New Mexico, living in West Texas right now.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and we are thrilled and excited to have all of you. One of our passions is we truly believe that we can start a positive revolution in the world. If we're going to do that, we know that we have to start with young people. Obviously, we have to start with ourselves first, but if we're going to truly effectuate real change, we've got to start with young people, and that's why we're so passionate about this course, about what we do, and about working with youth, because we know together we can make that difference.
And tonight we're continuing with the second series on how to connect with youth to positively impact them. Hopefully you guys were on the webinar last week. And if you weren't, we have sent you the recording, but we know that you're here because you have a calling or you feel a passion on your life to help youth. You just feel solidly that there's a purpose that you have, that you can make a positive impact in the lives of others, and especially youth going forward.
Yeah. And the one reality that we know is that the youth of today, as we talked about last webinar, they're facing a crisis, and they're facing a major crisis, probably stuff that we've all dealt with in our own past, but right now it just feels like it's of epic proportion, and no one's ever done anything about the problems that the young people today are facing. And truly, when you really start diving in and working with young people, you find out that there is a bunch of them who just feel that life is just completely hopeless. And there's just too many obstacles that they're going to be faced with.
You want to help youth. You want to help them overcome the problems and the issues they have, but you yourself may encounter certain obstacles that you have to overcome in order to help. One of them is the content. And that's what we looked at last week. We looked at the content. The second thing that you may need is the confidence. And that's what we're going to dwell on today, having the confidence of how do I effectively communicate with youth? How do I actually do it? How do I stand in front of a group and speak to them, facilitate to them, or even just counsel them and coach them? And the last one is credibility, which we hope maybe get to today. If not, we'll dwell on that one as much as we can in our last session. Well, last week we talked about what do youth need to hear. And so we want to recap real quick on that.
And really, there's three things when we're dealing with, obviously, and we say, and we talked about this last week, that the youth of today are facing a crisis of self-image, they're facing a crisis of relationships with others, and they're facing a crisis of focus, of goals, of even knowing what they want to achieve or how to achieve it. So for us, we want them to know why self-image is so critically important. Why are those relationships with other people so important? And then why are goals important? and being able to help them focus on those three things, as we say, be able to see the importance of those and then be able to move forward, is of critical importance. That's why we've got to get that done first before we can then move on to the connection piece.
One of the things we talked about last week is you don't need to be experts in any of these. You just need to have a passion and a desire to help youth with these. And you don't have to focus on all three of these. The one that speaks to you the most, is it self-image, helping them realize who they are and what they can become? Is it relationships, helping them to learn how to form very good relationships and overcome bullying, overcoming peer pressure, and being able to connect with parents and teachers and peers? Or is it helping them realize that they can dream? I was talking to a young man today, and he and I had both grew up in an organization in which we were taught goal setting at a very early age. Isabel, you are also, if I remember correctly, a part of that organization that taught you to dream and have goals at a very early age. But what he and I were talking about was the fact that most young people don't know that they can dream beyond their current circumstances. No. And even if they do dream, they don't know how they can take that dream and turn it into a goal, take the goal and turn it into a plan, and to take that plan and make it work so they can be, do, and have everything. And that's what we want to be able to help them do in those three things. So those are the three things that we talked about last week. You've got the recordings. When we send out the link for this recording, I'll include that again there in case you lost that email. So it'll be a link to that as well. But today we're going to focus on how to get youth to listen. That's a big one, Matt.
What'd you say?
How to get youth to listen. That's a big one.
Well, here's the thing that as we begin to really dive into this content and answer that question, how do we get youth to listen? I say that we can sum this up in one sentence. I say a lot of times, get over yourself. It's not about you. It's not about you. The day you realize that it's not about you and it's about a message and it's about the people that you're working with is the day that everything is going to begin to change. So we want to ask the question, what's more important, having a message or having the message heard? Obviously, we know what's more important. We know it's more important to have that message heard. But how often do we get over ourselves long enough to find out, okay, am I delivering this message in a way that anyone wants to hear? Quite frankly, am I delivering this in a way that a young person, a Gen Zer, would want to hear? I mean, too many times we get so wrapped up in our message that we forget that it's not about us. It's actually about getting the message across to someone.
And that's one of the pitfalls. Yeah, one of the major pitfalls is that we have a great story. We have a great opportunity to share a part of our lives with folks and let them learn from it. But we make it too much about us. We make it too much about, I want to be heard. I want to be respected. I want to get the attention there. And we do not put the attention on them. So we need to understand that the message is not about hers. If you guys have got any questions or comments, feel free to chat it, put it in the chat function so that we can see and answer any of your questions.
Well, and you know, to play in right with what you just said, whenever we're passionate, whenever we have a passion or we feel that calling, a lot of times we'll get wrapped up in that and we get so intense on it that we want to make sure that we do all we can do and kind of, quite frankly, we kind of put ourselves out front. When in reality, we don't need to be the hero. We need to be making other people the hero of their own story. And the day we can make another person the hero of their own story is the day that there's going to be such a connection to that person, because then, especially with a young person, especially with this age group that's coming up, when they see you're willing to get over yourself and, let's be honest, and make it about them, right? And this generation takes a lot of flack. They catch a lot of heat over, they're the trophy generation and it's all about them and it's all about what do Well, who did that to them? Like, we did it. We did it to them. We talked about that last time. So it's, and haven't we all been that way? Haven't we all wanted it to be about us? So if we can then come in and help other people see, hey, I'm just here to help you. And instead of us being the hero of the story, where should we be, James?
Well, we got to serve as the guide or the mentor in this story. We need to show them that we understand their situation, we understand their problem, and that we can help them get to where they want to go as the guide or mentor. We don't want to be up there sharing just all of our issues and all of our problems. We need to be connecting what is our experience with others. And Matt and I have found a resource that we would like to connect you with that we think does this better than anything that we could have done. So, Matt, would you take them through this?
Absolutely, because James and I have both gone through the class, and I'm telling you, when you figure this out, it will revolutionize the way that you speak, the way that you present yourself to other people, the way that you stand in front of a group. It will revolutionize how you do your website, for Pete's sake. It will change how you think about everything. Because what Donald Miller has done is he's really said, okay, 30% of your day is spent daydreaming, and yet if you go to a movie, you don't daydream. And why is that? Or if you've got a book and you're so interested in this book that you can't stop reading, and all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. and you're like, oh my goodness, I have to put this book down and go to sleep. Well, what happened there that made you so interested in this thing? And it's because it's all based upon a story. And every story since the beginning of time has had the same 7 principles. Every story that we've ever read, every scene, any movie that we've really got drawn into, major trilogy movies, major epic movies, they've all had these 7 principles. And that is this. Every movie, every story, every book, every character that has a character, and along in this, pretty early on in the story, we find out that the character has this little thing called a problem. And we're really concerned about this problem. The problem can be multifaceted. It can be an internal problem. It can be an external problem. It can be a philosophical problem, like good and evil within. And so there's this battle within and these problems. And then all of a sudden, they meet this person that's called a guide. And the guide understands. And the guide tries to connect with them. And the guide actually even is to the point that they can offer a plan to the character. And then when they give them that plan, here's your choice. You've got to now choose. Calls them to action. And then that action, that decision that they make based upon the plan that's been given is going to result in one of 2 outcomes. It's going to result in a positive outcome, or it's going to result in a negative outcome, a comedy or a tragedy, a win, a loss. I mean, every story has had these same principles. I mean, but if we're dealing with Generation Ziegler, think about one of the greatest movies runs that's ever come out with that this generation is going to deal with is this little guy by the name, has a scar on his head, guy by the name of Harry Potter, right? Harry Potter, he's got a major problem. He's got a bunch of problems. And he meets multiple guides who try to help him. Hagrid and Dumbledore and the bad guy, just forgot his name. And they all try to give him a different plan and call him to action. And depending on what action he takes, it's going to have a good or a bad outcome. So every great story, is based upon these 7 main principles. But where do we typically see ourselves in this scenario? We typically see ourselves as the main character, as the hero of the story. And we want to tell people what we know and how we can help them. And this is what we know and how we can, and why you should listen to us. And how well does that usually go over? If a salesman comes to your door saying, I've got a product that you have to have and you have to have it right now, what do you typically do? You say no. But if Allstate comes in and says, hey, we realize that you have a problem, and that is you just had a wreck. Remember the little girl, she has a wreck, her dad had the wreck, and she says, hey, Dad, you need Allstate. And Allstate becomes the guide to help them through and deal with that process. So it can be done in 30 minutes and 30 seconds or less. But we need to start looking at ourselves as the guide and making other people the hero of their own story. And we're just here to give them a plan and try to help call them to an action. And try to help get them to that good outcome that we can see in them, that we know is within them. And because we have that passion and we feel that calling for helping young people, we just need to help them see it in themselves. And when they see it in themselves, then, hey, they're the hero and they're going to accomplish great things.
And I think that's so important for us to realize that we're the most effective when we take ourselves out of the role of the central figure and we put them in the central figure. Now, that does not mean that we don't share ourselves.
No.
But it is all about that we relate it to them, that their story and your story are the same story, that we're going through this journey together. So one of the things that we wanted to do is connect you with Donald Miller. And you can go to Building a Story Brand. You can Google that, and you'll find Donald Miller's. He has lots of free information. He has a wonderful podcast in which you can find out information on it. So we'd love for you to have any questions. What questions do you have on that? Please type them in, and we'll be sure to get to them if you have any questions on that. But Story Brand, making sure that in your keynotes and in your facilitation that it is all about them understanding what their problem is. So that's why we started with content. So you will know what their problem is, that you can research who your audience is, understanding what their problem is, and then show them how you as the guide can give them that plan.
Yeah.
But you also have to prepare with a clear objective. Once you've established that you want to talk to them, you need to have, what is that one clear thing that you want them to understand when they leave your presentation? So there's a desperate need for clear communication. Here are some stats that Matt's going to share with you that are just astounding.
Get this. 75% of the people leaving a presentation have no idea what was communicated. That's 3/4. That's 3 out of 4 people had no clue when they walk out a door what that presentation was actually about. And 50% of speakers cannot articulate in a simple sentence. In one sentence, most speakers cannot articulate the objective of their talk. They can't do it. They have to give 3 or 4 sentences. Those numbers blew us out of the water. We get so wrapped up in our messaging that our message becomes so convoluted that nobody can even understand what it is. So 50% of speakers cannot articulate their message in one sentence. And if 3/4 of your audience walks out, if 3/4 of the people you talk to on a daily basis don't know what you're talking about, then we better start preparing with a clear objective in mind.
So a lot of times we're taught in speech classes and everything to have a central theme and then 3 points of that. And you're taught to write that way a lot of times in themes, but for some reason or other, it doesn't carry over. Some reason or other, when we actually get on that stage and we get that opportunity, we're not doing it. We're escaping away. We're not letting it happen there. We're not having there. We are wired as people to base our lives on goals and objectives. We are just wired that way. And so if you do not consciously give your audience an objective, if you do not give them something that you want them to leave with, then subconsciously an objective will take over. They will have a subconscious objective take over. And so if you were to ask them after you were to speak with them or to share with them a while, what did you learn in there? They may not even say anything close to what has happened. So that is one reason why on one of our recent presentations that Matt and I did, we had some of our staff, some of our speakers and trainers who were there with us to interview students as they were leaving, to ask them what did they learn during the thing and what did they want to do better, to make sure that what we actually said is what they actually heard. What we actually communicated was what was actually received. if we had not have had such a clear objective in there, we may have gone off the rail because we all like to go on rabbit trails. And how many of you can raise your hands if you want to on this, how many of you have heard speakers before and you have no idea what they were talking about?
I mean, it wasn't been guilty about doing it.
Oh, yeah. That's even worse. How many of us have been doing that as well? So,
hey, and here's one of the pieces of advice that I was given when I first started my speaking career was a friend said, just because you can go off script doesn't mean you should go off script. Because once you start getting into the weeds, then all of a sudden you realize, whoa, I've got to come back home. And so just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because you can wing a presentation certainly does not mean you should.
That's exactly right. If we look back at this and we talk about wanting to give them a plan here, a lot of us are going to say, well, I've got a 5-step or a 10-step plan I can help them with. I can help them in so many things. They're not wired to handle that much information. They need one clear objective. Maybe there's 3 points to emphasize that clear objective, but it needs to be just one clear objective. Man, any other thoughts on this? You've done a lot of speaking on this. How have you seen this done, or how have you witnessed this done with other people?
I tell you what what changed everything for me is because I knew my material and I knew my speech, and so I was like, I don't have to prepare that much because I know my speech, right? But when I heard what I'm about to say, it changed everything for me. And that was Zig Ziglar, who we work with their family. We work with the Ziglar family. If you don't know who Mr. Ziglar was, still to this day, even though he passed away in 2012 and didn't speak for several years before even then, he still to this day is known as the highest paid non-celebrity spokesperson of all times. At the height of his career in the 90s, 2000s, he was getting over $100,000 per speech, and he was booked 2 years in advance. Do you have to be a little bit good to be able to do that? I think yes. But even at the height of his career, Mr. Ziglar said, I still feel like I'm 2 to 3 years away from being as good as I can be. So here, the highest paid non-celebrity spokesperson speaker of all time, and he said, I'm still not as good as I can be yet. What does that say to us? Number one, that says we need to get over ourselves. We need to know it's not about us, it's about our message, and we need to make sure that message is clear. And when you begin to formulate your messaging in this fashion, putting other people as the hero and you being prepared with that objective, I have seen that the amount of standing ovations that I get at a keynote has almost gone to 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm making it about them and making that connection with them, and that's when everything changes.
So we wanted to give you a resource as well on where to go on this. We feel like the SCORE speaker training by Ken Davis is one of the most elite speaker trainings out there. And one of the things I wanted to do is and I was trying to look it up, and that's why my paper just dropped here. Ken Davis had a podcast. He ended it about a year ago, but you can still find it online. I think if you go to this website, they'll have a link to the podcast there in which he examines how do you determine what your objective is and communicate it in a very effective manner. How do you go from what your subject is, my subject is you, or my subject is, issues dealing with you. The central theme is self-image. My objective is how do you develop a self-image, or steps to developing a self-image. And then how can you build a speech upon that? And it is not only used just for keynoting, but you can create entire workshops around this. And if you want to coach individuals, coach youth, you can use the same format in building a coaching program as well. So I wanted to deal on this. One of the things that Matt and I are very excited to tell you about is that in 2019, the second half of 2019, Generation Ziglar will be launching in cooperation with Ken Davis's SCORE training, a youth speaker SCORE training, SCORE training. You're on our mailing list, so you'll get more information about that. So you just got a little sneak preview into something most folks don't even know about. Not even the master office at Ziegler knows as much as you do right now. So,
Nope.
but go to this guy, and we'll put a link for that also in our show notes, and our workshop notes.
Yeah. And then here's the thing that we want. That if I said, okay, if we were asked, what are 7 steps to giving an effective presentation? This is what we came up with. And number one thing is you have got to prepare. I think we've got that point across, but you've got to prepare and then prepare some more. But then the second thing that is of critical importance, that it seems like too many of us get so confident in our curriculum that we forget that we too need to practice.
And I would say you need practice, and even if you're just doing coaching.
Absolutely.
Even if you're doing one-on-one coaching, you need to practice out, verbalize what you want to say and the objectives you want to work over. Otherwise, you're going to stumble. And this task is too important for us not to do this. I played sports throughout my youth career, and the amount of practice that we put in, and our coach never said practice makes perfect. He would say practice produces permanent patterns of behavior. And that is something that I learned 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago. And I still remember that practice produces permanent patterns of behavior. So you want to practice over and over again so you know what these things are doing. And then what do you do?
And then that allows you, once you've been practicing, that then you can start to polish it. And when we say polish it, what we're going to even encourage you to do is you need to video yourself. It does not matter how you are presenting, in whatever form and to whatever group. At some point in time, you need to video yourself and you need to watch it back. And how do they need to watch it? What 4 ways do they need to watch it, James?
And we go over this a lot more in one of our other trainings, but 4 ways, quick ways that I would advise you to watch it is the first time, watch it with no sound. Just watch it. That way you'll see the little ticks that you're doing. You'll see what you're doing without having to listen. You'll see the little things. Then listen to it with no videos. That way you also can see what's going on. Third way in which to do it is to do it at a little bit higher speed, so that if you do have a tick where you move your hand or you are moving back and forth, that will be amplified and you'll be there. And the fourth thing is just normal. Now, I do not advise doing this for every single speech you make. But you do need to take one and go a deep dive into it. Take one presentation and do a deep dive into it. It will help you immensely.
Yeah, and and when we're talking about connecting to young people and connecting to this new generation that's coming up, one of the things that they are longing for are leaders and people that they can aspire to and people that they can follow. So when you practice, when you prepare, you practice, you polish, and you become not perfect at it. And that's not what anybody expects of a speaker or anyone who's a leader. No one, that's craziness. So trash that. But it allows you to perfect your craft and your message to the point that then you can notice what's going on with your audience and what's going on in the group that you're working with or the person you're working with. My wife, I get off of stage and my wife I start telling my wife something that was happening in the audience while I was talking. And she said, how is it that you can think about that while you're up there talking? And I said, because I know my material and it has allowed me, once going through these steps, it's allowed me to perfect the message to the point that then I can start connecting to the people. But
Number 5?
We got to warn you. There's going to be problems. Just get ready for them. I mean, get ready to handle them. There's going to be a mic go out. There's going to be a kid scream. Whatever. Just expect it and know that it's going to happen at some point in time. That way, when it does happen, you're like, "Hey, I knew this was coming," and then you're the professional. So you can go on.
Yeah, they're not looking for perfection. They're just looking for real.
Yep.
So if there's a problem, you don't have to worry about youth losing it because and not losing the connection with you. They will most likely lose connection with you if you're trying to be too perfect.
Yeah. Then
you are being real. And the last one is number 6, perform.
Yeah. You know what? You got to be bigger than yourself. Like you got to, especially, and this really applies to when you're on stage in front of a larger group like this, like the picture behind you that you see. When you're on a stage, you need to perform. You need to be bigger than yourself. You need to match the room. Okay. Now, if it's a small group, if it's you're dealing with 2 kids, you're dealing with 2 young adults, I should say, or okay, match it up to that. But when we say perform, you got to step up your game. You got to understand that, hey, I am the speaker, I am the leader, I am the facilitator. I need to perform at that level and be at that level, which takes it to number 7, which makes you the professional. And I say over and over and over again, I don't care if you're in front of 2 people or if you're in front of 2,000 people. You are the professional in the room. Act like it. And understand if you begin to put all these previous 6 steps into place, then you can be that professional. And you're going to have a connection point with this young generation that's super strong, because then they see you, they know you're real, they know you're prepared, they know you're legit, and they know what you're and you've made them the hero of the story, and they get your message. Then, hey, that's when we have major connection.
So what we want to do now is we want to answer some of the questions that you guys have sent us from the survey. So I'm going to ask Matt a couple of them. Matt, how do we keep their attention? How do we keep get everybody to participate?
Well, when we got that question in, the first thought that went through my head was, well, don't be dull and boring. Okay, when we're talking about Generation Z, this young generation that's coming up, they have been engrossed in a fast-paced, connective society. Everything has happened instantaneously. Everything has happened quickly for them. They are used to multitasking. That's the world they were born into. So if you want to keep them connected, you're going to have to elevate your game. If you start putting in all these steps that we just laid out, then you're going to be able to bring your level to a point that you can keep their attention. And when you've done all this, then you can do things like just like that. Not too long ago, I was a big keynote. There's a group of young adults on the front row. They were not paying attention. They got a little distracted. Attention
never happens.
What? They started wandering off, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get those. I'm gonna get those ones right there on the front row." So then because of all the stuff that we've laid out, I knew what to do, and I knew I could lower my voice and make it so uncomfortable for them to talk. And then you could just see them. They stopped doing what they were doing, and then I'll start looking up there because, hey, speaker dude has dropped his voice to a whisper. So once you begin putting all this stuff in play, you can start doing those voice inflections, seeing what you need to do. If you need to pick up your game, if you need to take a break, get over yourself. Understand, it's not about you. It's about the message and making sure they hear your message. So get over yourself. Make it about them. And then everything, then you're going to keep their attention.
You got one for me?
Yep, I do. So, and this one I thought was perfect because obviously you have children. I'm Uncle Matt. I thought this one was a little better for you. The question was, what about their language? And how do you communicate to them on their level and with their language?
What I've seen a lot of times from novice speakers who are working with you, especially if there is an age difference, is the desire to try to look cool and feel cool by using current or youth language. That's not real. If it's not who you are as a person, it is not real. Mr. Ziegler, when he was speaking through, was at least probably 45 years difference between him and most of the youth audiences that he was speaking. He grew up in the 40s, and here they were in the 80s and 90s, in the late 90s. And yet he was able to connect with them, and he never was using current language or current vernacular or the youth culture language at the time. How was he doing that? Because he was sincere and he was sharing his heart, and they knew he was caring about them. We've heard this statement, we've heard this saying many times, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Well, Mr. Ziegler added the words about them. So they don't really care what language you're using. You don't have to use all the new slang terms and know what is going on, as long as they have a sense that you care about them and that you are there for them, then you will get the response back from them. Now, let me back up and say, if it is part of your personality to use that language, if it's part of your personality to have kind of a youthful spirit that is even a distance in your age, maybe be 10 years, 5 years, anywhere from 5 on up, whatever, go for it. But don't feel like you got to force it. Don't feel like you got to force something in there. They want to know, do you care, more than they want to know, do you speak my language in terms?
Yeah, agreed.
So let's see here. Matt, how about this? How do we find ways to make activities that seem important to them? How do we get activities that seem important to them? Where I guess that question is coming from a facilitation standpoint.
Well, okay. So I think this also goes back to a little bit about what we said early on, and that's, what's more important, your message or having your message heard. Get over yourself. But I also think we need, as presenters and as people who are working with others, we need to make sure that the activity that we're doing actually adds value to the message. Because sometimes we end up using activities as filler.
That's true.
And who's got time for that? I mean, if we needed that, we'd just end early and we'd go home or whatever. So when you're using activities, make sure that they are a benefit to the message.
To that objective.
Yeah, to the objective. And you can also, once an activity is done, you should be saying, okay, what's the point of this activity? And throw it back on them and start getting that feedback and start drawing it out of actually what the point of the activity was, so that you keep reinforcing the content that you've been trying to get across to them.
Now, I would even take that back farther too, and using that into opening activities. A lot of times, speakers, facilitators, trainers, they want to come in and they want to do an opening activity at their youth group that gets everybody up and excited and moving, but it has nothing to do, no correlation. So they do this great activity and they say, now that we've had fun, let's get serious. Yeah. And there's totally a disconnect there. So let's try to have everything flow towards that one central activity going forward.
Yeah. Okay. So, and let's keep it in the presentation realm. And James, tell everybody a little bit, what is your opinion and what is your stance on the use of PowerPoints? Is it still valid for this generation, or is it outdated?
I don't think so. My use of PowerPoints I believe PowerPoints can be very, very powerful if, specifically on PowerPoints, if we're reducing the amount of words that is on the screen. If you'll notice on any of the PowerPoints that we do, the amount of words versus the image is reduced quite considerably. We try to keep the amount of words as low as we possibly can, to the lowest point. That might mean on some of our presentations that we have a lot more slides, where some people might put a slide up there and it have 9 points, and each point has 7 or 8 points to it, 7 or 8 words or 10 words. We'll keep that very low because this is a very visual generation. We're all visual. We're visual learners. We like to see things. Yeah, and I'll add story. Let me tell this story. To give a story, one of the more effective speakers I've ever heard is the former editor of Success Magazine, Darren Hardy. Now, Darren Hardy is one of the elite speakers across the nation right now, business and personal development and leadership speakers. If you haven't seen Darren, just look him up. Darren, D-A-R-R-E-N Hardy. He did an hour presentation. He had, I think there were 90-some slides in his presentation. Not a single slide had a word on it.
I love it.
Not a single slide had a word on it, but every image moved us to the point that he wanted to take us. So I think you can use slides very well on this. I think what kills it, and this would kill it in the classroom, and as a former teacher, I know this, what kills it is when it's all words. Because what do you think they are doing when you've got 100 words up on there? Well, they're doing what that is, or they're reading what you're saying up there, and they're not listening to you. You want them to listen to you. So what's behind you is there to help you, not as a substitute for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll add to that too. Too many presenters let the PowerPoint be the presenter, and they're just there to help it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You got to be the presenter. You got to know your material well enough that you don't need that. And one of the things that you'll notice that we've been doing throughout these webinars is we start talking about the next slide before we advance to the next slide. Not always, but we start we start setting the next thing up before we go to that, because we're the presenters, not the thing that you're staring at.
Right.
So be professional, know your material well enough to know what's coming, and that's just a visual. And when it comes to Gen Z, there's a little thing, thing called right here called Instagram. And why is Instagram so popular with this generation? Because it's all image driven. It's all image driven. So it goes right back to what James just told you. Once you just use that as an aid to help you to make your point even better, then it works. Lastly, on that issue though, one last thing, be prepared for it not to work.
Yeah.
If you know your material well enough and the PowerPoint goes down and you're able to look at a crowd, look at an audience and say, it's no big deal. I didn't really need it anyway. I was just throwing it out there for the fun of it. What did you just do? You just became the ultimate professional. There.
One of the other questions here, the next part is that, do you have any questions? Somebody's already typed this question in. Is they wanted to know, they're concerned about students or youth attitudes towards their age. I guess they have a big age gap and they want to know about this. That they think that they're out of touch. I want to list that back to what we just said a while ago. They don't really care how old you are. They don't care who you are. They don't care anything about you. What they care is, do you care about them? So you could be well out of their age bracket and they'll still relate to you. This concept that has gone through that say the only people that can work with you is those that are younger than you is crazy.
Nuts.
People want to know you care. I will listen to someone who cares about me no matter where they are coming from because it's about me, and that's putting them back on the hero. If you want them to relate to you and you want you to have influence over them, you've got to show you care. How do you do that? You show you care by making them the hero. Does anybody else if you have any other questions, write them in. Anyone else? Matt, anything else you want to say on those?
No, we would say that we're by no means perfect in what we're doing. I think the biggest thing you can do in connecting with youth is to just put these things into place, but be real about it too. And that's, if you study anything about Generation Z, they're craving for the real deals because they know what fake is. They see it every day on their phones. They see that part. They want real. So be that way and be transparent and be open. And when you're that way, then that's a true counselor. That's a true guide because that's an emotional connection. And when you can connect to somebody emotionally, then they'll follow you. They can follow you over a cliff if the emotional connection's tight enough.
All right, our next one on the 29th, how to connect with youth workshop, more on how to get them to listen. We'll answer more questions. And the last part is how to get the opportunity. How do you get the credibility so that you can get an opportunity to work with youth in the areas that you want to work? Some of you just want to work with youth in your immediate circle, maybe at your church, maybe in your classroom, groups that you already have. But some of you want to expand that level of influence. How do you get that opportunity? How can you reach out to other people? We want to talk to you about that, and specifically, how do you address on that forward? Again, we'd love for you to connect with us on Facebook at Generation Ziegler. We do thank those of you who since last week have liked us on both of those pages. We've seen an uptick on those, and we really appreciate your time. And email your questions, comments, concerns, accusations, innuendos, or anything like that to info@generationziegler.com. We do read those. We don't send them to the spam folder. We do read those and take those very seriously. So we will take time after this for anyone who wants to stay on and ask us questions live. But thank everyone for attending tonight, and we thank you for those of you who are watching the recording. We appreciate your desire to work with youth, and we thank you for your effort. Matt, any closing thoughts?
Nope. Have a blessed evening. We appreciate you guys.